Well, Happy New Year, everyone. I hope that 2021 has started off on the right foot with you. I want to remind you that we are in the midst of our 21 days of prayer and fasting, and we would love to have you be a part of that with us each morning, Monday through Friday. We are gathering at the campus from 6 until 7 for a time of encouragement and worship and prayer. If you're not able to join us, either because of your schedule or because you're continuing to shelter in place, we want to invite you to still join us for prayer. So you can go to cometothewell.org/prayer, and you can see our services there just by following the prompts. Or you can just get up in the mornings and jump onto our virtual prayer room using that same link and begin to pray for all of the Wellers. And we encourage you to be a part of that with us this year. Well, as we are thinking about 2021, I cannot help but reminisce a little bit about the start of 2020. Everyone was so optimistic about what the year was going to hold. But it was interesting as I went back and listened to some of the things people said. Everyone said the similar thing, that Jesus was going to work in ways that we didn't expect. And I got to tell you, I did not expect 2020. But the promise is that God would use everything to work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes, if we will continue to look to him, to lean to him, to carry all of our cares, our concerns, our circumstances to him. And so I was reading through an article last month about lessons, leadership lessons, that we can sort of take away from 2020 as we move into 2021. And Mark Threlfall asked a number of academic and business leaders two questions. He said this: based on your experience of this turbulent past year, what is the one key competency or intelligence or skill set that you would urge leaders to develop or strengthen or foster in 2021? In other words, based on what we learned from this last year, what should we all be working on in 2021? The second question he asked was this: what area of impact or guiding purpose would you like to look back on this time next year and feel like you made a positive impact? In other words, as we think about 2021, what is the area that we need to all be getting better at so that we're not sort of sitting in this place a year from now? And it was interesting, the answers they came up to, but I've distilled it down to what I think were the three kind of key things, the essence of what the article was presenting. And by the way, I will put a link to the article down below, so if you want to check it out yourself, you're welcome to. But this was my distillation of the information that they gave. I felt like, to answer number one, what was that key competency skill that you needed to work on, they basically landed on two things. The first one was managing and maintaining good relationships. That seemed to be a key gap in 2020 and something that was definitely needed to be fostered in 2021. The second one was that we all needed to work on sort of our speed and flexibility, our agility, if you will. To the answer to question number two, what do we need to be doing, focusing on, prioritizing in 2021 in order to make sure we're not sitting right here this time next year? The answer was pretty clear, and that was we needed to continue to improve and innovate our use of technology. It was interesting, as I thought about those three answers to the two questions, I couldn't help but see an overlap or a correlation to our anchor questions. We have three questions that we basically ask ourselves at the Well anytime we're trying to make leadership or directional decisions. The first one is always, does what we're thinking about doing, does it really foster authentic community? Is it really going to grow? Is it going to maintain and manage the relationships that we think are so vital to a healthy community? Number one. Number two, the second thing is, does it cultivate future leaders? Does it help us put people on the road to growing and gaining a certain level of independence in their faith and a greater dependence personally on Christ and their ability to lead and help make disciples, love others into deeper levels of relationship with Jesus Christ. And finally, our third anchor question is, does it advance us technologically? We never want to take backward steps as it relates to technology. So I want to look at those three things just very quickly and see how we can apply those into our leadership lives as we're thinking about how to lead our groups and our teams, or maybe your work project or at school, how we can apply these leadership principles to our life. So the first one, maintaining and managing relationship. That answers the first core anchor question for us. If something maintains or manages good relationships, then it also fosters good community. Proverbs 27 verse 23 says, "Know the state of your flocks." As a leader, it's vitally important that we know where our people are, what they're going through, what they're experiencing, what's happening in their lives. And that's what happened with COVID, is immediately in the flash of light, we were cut off, we were isolated, and we were scrambling to find new ways and connection points with our people. And it was easy for us to sort of, in the midst of all of what we were dealing with, sort of lose sight of other people. And it's one of the reasons that it's so vitally important to be a good leader that you have to be in contact with your people every week. That doesn't matter if it's a secular iteration or a spiritual iteration. As a small group leader, you should contact every one of your people every single week. And that's outside of a worship experience or the small group itself, that you're having regular contact engagement where you can have those one-on-one conversations, or they can give you that information. That applies too if you're a team leader. Maybe you're helping out with the cleaning teams or the children's teams or whatever it is. You want to stay in good contact with your people so that you always know the condition of your flock. The people who had the strongest connections going into COVID experienced the least amount of anxiety, and the opposite was true too. Those people who were most isolated experienced the most fear, anxiety, pressure in this past year. The second thing is, make sure that they're staying connected not just to you, but also to one another. So if we read on in our passage, Proverbs 23, it says, "Know the state of your flock and put your heart into caring for them." Here's the thing, you can't always be everything to all your people. That's why God has given you community. It's why He's given you a team. It's why He's given you a group. So not only should we be contacting our people every week, we need to be praying for our people every week, and we need to be encouraging each other to be praying for one another. So every time we come together as a group or a team, we should be taking prayer requests. We should find out what's going on in everyone's life. We should be encouraging each other to pray for one another, not only when we're there, but when they're off on their own, and then to be sending each other tweets, texts, emails, calls, following up, checking on one another. Every single Weller should have their name called out before the Lord every single day by the leader. And then we should just have a cornucopia, plethora of other people who we know are also praying for us. The next thing that we want to think about is giving good pastoral care. When we think about this idea of managing and maintaining relationships, we want to make sure that we're taking care of people when they're sick, that we're making sure that they're getting meals, or that if they need groceries, all those kinds of things, that we're giving good care for them. But we also want to make sure that we're just physically there for them, to give them just encouragement, just pats on the back, just hold their hand, those kinds of things. We want to make sure that we're there to counsel, to coach, to mentor, to be available for our people. The third area that we want to think about is, again, we want to pray for every single person every single day. Pray for every single person every single day. So when we think about that idea of maintaining good relationships, stay in good contact with your people, make sure that they're staying in good contact with one another, give good pastoral care, make sure you're praying for your people every single day. Well, what was the second thing they said? Speed and flexibility. What's your agility? How are you able to compensate and make adjustments to changes? And COVID taught us that everything is subject to change in a matter of minutes. And this really answers for us the question, does it foster future leadership? And some of you might be like, okay, so show me how this is going to work. Well, in Exodus chapter 18, verse 13, Moses' father-in-law comes and meets him and sees that he is literally bearing the weight of this massive community. In fact, it says that Moses would go out and from first light until dark, he would do nothing but deal with the anxieties, with the disputes, with the issues that were facing the people. And in verse 17, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, said this, hey, what you're doing, this is not good. And oftentimes as leaders, that's our anxiety, right? We're thinking, man, if I'm going to be available for my people, I'm not going to be available for work. I'm not going to be available for my family. I'm not going to be available for myself. That's what Jethro was pushing back on. He was saying, listen, that's not the way it should work. That's not good leadership. He said, you're going to wear yourself out and you're going to wear the people out as well. This job is too heavy for you to handle by yourself. So whatever anxiety you had when we were thinking about managing and maintaining a relationship, understand that that anxiety is because we oftentimes approach leadership with a wrong mentality that it ultimately is up to us. Every one of us need to be raising up people on our team, in our groups, in our life, in our project, where we're able to give things away so that our key responsibility really is that coaching, that loving, that leading, rather than dealing with all of those tasks. Verse 21, select honest men and women who fear God. Appoint them as leaders over groups of 1,000 and 150 and 10. They should always be available to solve all of the normal things, to address all the day-to-day stuff, and then you can have people bring the really big stuff to you. So all of us need to be raising people up. If you're in a small group, you need to be raising up interns, people who can assist you, assistant leaders. If you're on a team, you need to be raising up assistants. Not only that, but you can raise up roles. In any kind of a job, there are roles that people play. And we as leaders want someone who can do everything, but it's not practical. If each time we had a team or a group of people, we were thinking about, all right, who is my most personable person, and make them your recruiter. They're the ones that are going to grow your group or attract people into your team or whatever. Who's the most organized person? Well, that person is probably your scheduler. They're the persons who are going to make sure that meetings are happening, that food is getting there, or snacks or coffee's being made, or whatever needs to happen is happening. Who's your most experienced person? That should probably be your trainer, the person who's developing and growing other people in your group. And then who's that person that really thrives by working behind the scenes? That's your ops guy or your ops lady. They're the ones who are making sure that everything is where it needs to be, so when everyone steps up to do whatever it is you're trying to do, they have the tools required. So we're going to manage and maintain good relationships. We're going to learn to be faster and more flexible by raising other people up so that all of that isn't falling to us, which oftentimes means falling through the cracks. And finally, we're going to continue to improve and innovate in our technology. And obviously, of course, this answers our third question. Does this advance us? Does this grow us technologically? And oftentimes we think that the Bible or faith is sort of contrary to technology. We think that they're at odds with one another because maybe one is ancient and intuitive and reflective, where the other seems something other. But nothing could be further from the truth. Scripture has always celebrated and venerated those natural steps that are taking place within our humanity. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 17, it talks about Cain being the first person who ever created a city, who created a system of people living together in a cooperative way. Verse 20, it talks about a man named Jabal, who was the first person who ever really began to think through the process of keeping livestock and cultivating herds and flocks for the benefit of mankind. In verse 21, it talks about a man named Jubal, who thought about musical instruments and the idea of entertainment and leisure and activity and worship and all of those wonderful things that we get from musical instruments. And in verse 22, it talks about a man named Tubal-Cain, who was the first to forge tools out of bronze and iron. Scripture has always venerated that advance of technology. We don't want to let anything have control or a grip on our life. At the same time, God has given us all of these tools for our advantage. So we need to find ways to improve on our use and innovate technology in 2021 to make sure we're reaching and influencing and impacting the maximum amount of people. So many of you right now are having your meetings through Zoom. Take time to learn whatever platform you're using. Maybe you're using WebEx, or maybe you're using Meetups, whatever it is. Don't continue to let yourself slide with a remedial understanding of the technology. Maybe you've held back from downloading the app or going online and accessing the web page. Make sure that you're leaning into these things. These things are not distractions. They're not hindrances. They're actually great tools, and we encourage you to take advantage of them. And not only take advantage of them, but encourage others to do and train them. So let me ask you, how would you answer those questions? What do you feel like are the key competencies, the key skill sets, intelligence that you want to grow from 20 to 21? And what's the one area that you want to really push into to make sure that you're not sitting here this time next year? Well, thanks so much for letting me share a couple of my thoughts on those questions. God bless you. Have a great month, and hope to see you at our 21 days of prayer and fasting.